Welcome to the Jim Acosta Show, and it's another day that ends in Y in the Epstein Gate cover-up. Today, Donald Trump told the Justice Department to investigate anybody but himself when it comes to Jeffrey Epstein. Here to discuss is investigative journalist Vicky Ward. Vicky, great to see you. And I guess remember that Epstein email that called Trump the dog that hasn't barked? Well, the dog, you could say, is barking a lot today. I guess we should just dive right into this. A lot of things to talk about. I guess, first of all, your reaction to Trump saying, he wants the DOJ to investigate Bill Clinton and Larry Summers, but, not himself, which I guess, there's the social post there. Anybody but himself. Yeah.
I wasn't surprised by that, Jim, because I've reported this, that back in 2015, when, Trump was running for president the first time around, and 2015 was when Virginia Roberts' allegations against Prince Andrew, she actually identified Prince Andrew by name. She hadn't done that before. And she came out with claims that she'd made in a class action lawsuit. When Trump heard all about that and was wondering aloud to his campaign staff, who included a guy called Sam Nunberg, if his previous relationship with Epstein would be a problem for him. His immediate reaction to Sam was, oh, well, Epstein is a much bigger headache for Bill and Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton was obviously running against him for president at the time, than Epstein is for me. And and anyway, I chucked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago. So that was how he dealt with the issue back in 2015. So it's almost surprising it's taken him this long to get to the same point in this cycle about Epstein.
Everything's cyclical, I guess, to some extent. But the other thing, and we should mention that I guess Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, has said she will assign an investigator to this, a prosecutor to this. So stay tuned for developments on that front. It's another instance where, Trump is just ordering the DOJ to do things, which is another thing that we could talk about some other time. But let's talk about the April 2011 email, because Vicky, you've investigated Epstein for so many years. You've broken a lot of stories. You've uncovered a lot of stuff. When these emails came out, I thought they were pretty explosive, because here we have it in black and white. This April 2011, this is before Donald Trump becomes a candidate for office. He was sort of dabbling in politics back then. He was the birther stuff. He was going on talk shows and talking about politics, but he wasn't a presidential candidate. But Jeffrey Epstein saying to Ghislaine Maxwell, I want you to realize that the dog that hasn't barked is Trump. Victim, redacted, spent hours at my house with him. And he has never once been mentioned, police chief, etc. I'm 75% there. Ghislaine Maxwell says, I've been thinking about that. Your thoughts on this? Because there aren't many plausible explanations that sound good to me for Donald Trump. But what do you think? What did you take away from this? Because you know this much better than I do.
So I think you have to connect that email with one he sends himself much later in 2019. But I think context is really important.
I want to share that one too, but go ahead.
So let's take them in order. The 2011 email to Ghislaine Maxwell in April is right after the Mail on Sunday and then the Daily Mail have published that photograph of Virginia Roberts with Prince Andrew and his, arm around her waist. And allegations, the allegations that we sort of are familiar with now, that Epstein, pimped her out, but she doesn't specifically name Prince Andrew, and she doesn't name the people she says he pimped her out to. And in the second article, Trump is mentioned along with Naomi Campbell and other people, just as people who were in Epstein's orbit. So, and Maxwell came out swinging in the wake of those two articles, accusing Virginia Roberts of lying. And various other people who were named, including the former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak.
Yeah.
You know, they back then, believe it or not, they had spokespeople who did talk to the Mail on Sunday and said, yes, we know Jeffrey Epstein. You know, Ehud Barak knows Jeffrey Epstein, doesn't know anything about Virginia Roberts. Trump said nothing. I mean, arguably there was nothing to say, but as we know well, you know, Trump in those days was on speed dial to places like Page Six.
Right.
You know, it was New York real estate Trump with, you know, Trump was Trump. And so we also do know at this point that Jeffrey Epstein didn't want Ghislaine Maxwell to weigh into this publicly. I mean, it's one of the things he subsequently sent emails to her and wished he wouldn't do it. He himself remained dead silent. And so I think when he's, you know, he's noting that Trump is staying quiet, which is not usual. But he then, in this email, then goes on to talk about the Palm Beach police chief, right?
Yeah.
He's 75% there. Well, and I also think, Jim, just to put context, it's worth remembering that in 2009, which is 2 years before all of this,
right,
Trump has already got on the phone, unlike any of the guys, the other bold-faced names who are hanging around with Epstein. Trump volunteers to get on the phone to Brad Edwards, then a not well-known lawyer in Florida who's bringing together the Epstein victims in a class action suit because they're going to sue because the plea deal that was the non-prosecution agreement was done behind their backs. And when Brad Edwards reaches out to speak to Trump via his counsel, Alan Garton, Alan Garton says, no, you don't need to subpoena him. He'll jump on the phone with you. And he was the only one of all these well-known high-profile men whose names we kind of all know by now. And Trump gets on the phone and says to Brad Edwards, you know, how can I help? And he says, yes, I did used to hang out with Epstein. He tells him this story that emerged again in the emails that came out a couple of days ago. He tells him how he stood in Epstein's living room in Palm Beach, and then he looked out the window, and there was a group of remarkably young girls, and he asked Epstein about it, and Epstein said, yeah, they're part of my mentorship program. And you know, Trump, I mean, went out of his way, according to Brad Edwards, who's written about this in his book, to be helpful. Edwards also says that as time ticked by and he interviewed more and more of these witnesses and more survivors, he reckoned that Trump hadn't quite told him the full extent of his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. But I've always wondered, I mean, you know, Donald Trump's very smart. I mean, to be willing to give up time to jump on the phone to talk about Jeffrey Epstein in 2009 is an unusual thing to have done. Why did he do that? Was he trying to get ahead of a situation? Or was it because there was such bad blood between these two guys? And I must say, Jim, as you read, reading all of the emails that were released 2 days ago, it did seem as if Jeffrey Epstein was obsessed with Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I mean,
his name is all over this.
More than 50% of these emails were gossip and speculation and questions about Trump. And given that they hadn't actually spoken since 2004, you had to wonder.
Allegedly, yeah, right.
Allegedly, but you had to wonder why. And that's why I think when you think about the dog didn't bark email in 2011, and it mentions the Palm Beach police chief in that email, and then you go to the one that he writes in 2019, January
Yeah.
2019. He
Let's show
writes,
that one.
yeah, he writes this email to himself and then forwards it to Michael Wolff. And we know that Michael Wolff is looking, he's Trump's biographer. He writes, you know, vast number of books on Trump. And that's very useful for Jeffrey Epstein because he, you know, uses all the information Michael tells him. You know, he thinks that's helpful for him. He then goes and tells the Russians. But Michael, we know, we've seen from, is wants anything on Trump. And we've also seen in the emails that Epstein says, I'm the one who can bring Trump down. And January 2019 is right after the Miami Herald's excellent series by Julie K. Brown, Perversion of Justice, has been published. It's right around the time that Ben Sasse, then the senator for Nebraska, is joining with Republican, is joining with the Democrats. They're beginning the drumbeat saying, why has nothing been done about Jeffrey Epstein? It's just a few months before he is, in fact, finally going to be arrested. And so I think it's fascinating that he spews all of this out. And some of it, the first half is sort of defending himself.
Right.
But the
second part, yeah,
is all about this business deal that supposedly caused the rift between the two men. And
the house, right?
Yes, this battle for this house that was going into bankruptcy. Epstein wanted it to buy it for himself, asked Trump to come see it because he wanted suggestions for how to, you know, where to put a swimming pool and reconfigure it. And the next thing he knows, they're in the auction and Trump outbids him and gets the house in auction for $45 million. And Epstein, in his telling of this to Michael Wolff, says, you know, there's problems with that because Trump doesn't have $45 million. He has nothing. Now you have to question, how did Jeffrey Epstein know that? And he says, given that he has nothing, he then begins to question the things that happen next, which is that basically Trump puts it on a market at such a ridiculously high price that no one's going to touch it, but it will then justify why a Russian oligarch, who's one of the few people who wouldn't probably care about paying such a high price, a few years later comes in, buys it for $100 million. So I think you can see that the insinuation from Epstein is this money laundering, is you know, did he buy it for the Russian oligarch? And then he questions, how did Trump disclose this on his tax forms? Because did he
pay taxes? Did
he declare the capital gain on this? Okay, so that is what he's saying in this email to Michael. He's basically saying, go away and have a look at this. I will say something else, Jim. I suspect that he says there were only 3 people involved in the bankruptcy of this house. The other is a guy called Pulte, P-U-L-T-Y.
Right.
I will bet you that is in fact Pulte, P-U-L-T-E. Jeffrey Epstein could not spell.
I saw that, and I was wondering the exact same thing.
Connect. That is either the father or the grandfather of the man in the news running Fannie Mae. So
and running more than just Fannie Mae. He's suggesting people like Eric Swalwell for investigation and so on.
Exactly.
Wild. So, I mean, I saw that too.
Yes. So, but I think, you know, this is clearly Jeffrey Epstein telling Michael, go after Trump. This is what I have on him. But I know from Michael Wolff, because he and I have talked, we've done interviews on Substack, that the reason Epstein was so obsessed with Trump was because he believed that it was Trump who had gone to Michael Reiter, the Palm Beach police chief, right after this fight over the bankruptcy.
Ah.
According to Michael Wolff, Epstein said that he threatened Trump, that he was going to expose his finances. Well, I mean, I have a problem with that, because what was he going to expose, and to whom?
So these two guys, Epstein and Trump, are fighting.
Tooth and nail. That he was going to expose Trump's finances, but I don't know how he was going to, I mean, and the idea of Jeffrey Epstein phoning up, I don't know, a reporter at the Wall Street Journal kind of defies belief. But Epstein's working theory was that it was Trump who tipped off the Palm Beach police, and it is true. The Washington Post did report that 2 weeks after this house sale, the Palm Beach police chief did receive a tip about young girls going in and out of Jeffrey Epstein's house.
Wow.
So,
yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. The other issue too is that, just the other day when Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, was trying to knock this down, she said, Trump got rid of Jeffrey Epstein because he was a creep and a pedophile. That is somehow not in line with the timeline, I should say. But can we play that, and then I want to play this other thing, and then we'll talk about it, and then
sure.
Get you to
Have your statement about the new Epstein emails that have been released by House Democrats. Separate from why you believe the emails were made public, can you address their substance? Did the president ever spend hours at Jeffrey Epstein's house with a victim?
These emails prove absolutely nothing other than the fact that President Trump did nothing wrong. And what President Trump has always said is that he was from Palm Beach, and so was Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was a member at Mar-a-Lago until President Trump kicked him out because Jeffrey Epstein was a pedophile and he was a creep. And this email you refer to with the name of a victim that was unredacted now and has since been reported on in this room.
She says that Trump kicked Epstein out because he was a liar and a creep. But this is what Trump was asked in 2019, whether he knew what Epstein was doing with underage girls. And here's what Trump said in 2019. This is at the White House during his first term.
No, I had no idea. I haven't spoken to him in many, many years, but I did have no idea.
So he says he has no idea. He kicked out Jeffrey Epstein from Mar-a-Lago. Caroline Leavitt says, for being a creep and a pedophile. So that means those two things they don't work. They don't square.
They don't. I think it's worth.
And there's been a lot of lying about what Trump's knowledge of the behavior was, of the criminal behavior was.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is worth pointing out that in Virginia Giuffre's memoir, which has only just been published, that there is a footnote in which she herself refers to the fact that in 2020, a book reported that Trump kicked Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago, not because of her, but because Epstein was hitting on the teenage daughter of a member. And so it's worth, I think, noting that that's something that Virginia Giuffre wound up believing. But why Donald Trump can't remember his own history on this is, it's puzzling. Yes, it is. It's very strange.
In the April 2011 email, can somebody explain me why he was spending hours at the house with a victim? And it's been reported, and the White House alleged that that the name that's redacted there is Virginia Giuffre's name. But until I see the email unredacted, I don't know that is the case. And do we have any? Is that still a question that hangs in your mind? What is this all about?
Well, I mean, I'm going to come back to the money, Jim.
Yeah. You think it still come back to me?
Because at this point,
it could come back. Yeah.
Could come back. Yes, because Epstein does claim, and I can't remember at this point. I've read so many emails, whether it's in this batch of emails or in previous batch of emails. He and you do have to remember, Epstein was a complete liar. I mean, no one knows that better than me. I mean, I had to sit through months and months of it. But he claimed that he had saved Trump from bankruptcy. and that he was a financial advisor to Trump in much the same way that he was to Leslie Wexner and to Leon Black. And so, you know, one can imagine in that scenario that Trump might pop along to Jeffrey Epstein's living room in Palm Beach to have a chat. I mean, that's not so extraordinary. But again, it's the whole, you know, it's the whole idea. They're sitting there are all these girls around, and we know, we've got the documentary evidence of how they all palled around at parties with, you know, lots of models around.
Right.
It's you know, I guess one can see why Donald Trump, you know, doesn't like the imagery that that all of this just keeps, you know, keeps putting out there. I mean, it's not the kind of, it's not the imagery he wants us to be thinking about. He wants us thinking about his new ballroom, and other things.
Right. And Vicky, the other one last thing I wanted to ask you about is Steve Bannon. He shows up in these documents and in these text exchanges with Jeffrey Epstein. And, you know, the folks over at Media Matters, they're reporting this. And I had seen this mentioned elsewhere, that there's also the issue that Steve Bannon may have had, some 15 hours of video footage of interviews with Jeffrey Epstein that he did back in 2019. I mean, this is somebody else who probably had an axe to grind with Donald Trump. Steve Bannon was fired by Donald Trump after Charlottesville. Bannon was the chief strategist at the White House, was fired in the aftermath of that. And so there was some bad blood, but then they reunited, and, you know, he became an advisor to Trump after that. But it's strange that Bannon is in the middle of all this. Yeah,
so this actually has been written by none other than Michael Wolff.
Okay.
And a lot of people missed it because it was in, I think, if not the last book, the penultimate book that Michael wrote, which was it was a chapter right at the end. And it kind of didn't gel with the rest of the book. And I think a lot of people missed it, but he does describe how Bannon and Michael and Epstein's attorney, Reed Weingarten, would all get together and, believe it or not, coach Epstein for his great comeback. They coached him to appear on 60 Minutes. And, you know, yes, was this the wisest thing for Steve Bannon to be doing? I would suggest not. I mean, I know Steve, I did back in the day at one point say to Bannon, I had heard that he was maybe going to even get on a plane with Epstein. And actually in the emails, you see that Epstein says, you've got to travel. And I did say to Bannon, don't go anywhere near Jeffrey Epstein.
Wow. Anyway. Yeah. Well, it doesn't sound like Steve Bannon listened to that advice. But Vicky, it sounds to me, though, we have more to uncover. It's the reason why the Epstein files have to be released, and we're not going to know the full story until they're released. But always appreciate you coming on and diving into this stuff. I'm sure we'll do it again. I'm sure something else will pop up and want to do it again. But I saw your video about that 2019 email that Epstein sent himself, and I thought that was fascinating. So nice work as always. Vicky, great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
All right, let's quickly switch gears. Let's go to Dave Ehrenberg, our friend and legal analyst. There's Dave. As always, great to see you. I mean, let's dive into the topic that everybody's been talking about over the last 24 hours. More than that is Jeffrey Epstein. And Dave, these emails, these documents that have emerged, I mean, it takes your breath away. The documents that the Democrats first put out Wednesday morning, were pretty staggering. I mean, there's the April 2011 email. We're showing it right now, where Jeffrey Epstein says to Ghislaine Maxwell that Trump is the dog that hasn't barked, and that he had spent hours at his house with one of the victims. And Ghislaine Maxwell replies to that by saying, "Yeah, I've been thinking about that." I mean, that is bad as that is. There's a lot more to it, and the Republicans on the committee who control that committee, I guess they got so fired up they decided to just unleash, 20,000 documents and emails and so on. And I don't know if they meant to do this or this was inadvertent on their part, but one of the emails that they released, the Republicans released, is one of them is from Jeffrey Epstein to his lawyer, Kathy Rumler, saying, "I know how dirty Donald is." And I mean, And this is in 2018, when Trump is president the first time. Your thoughts on all this, Dave?
Well, that email, the first one you mentioned about Trump is the dog that did not bark, that came out in 2011. That was
Right.
That
That's
was
an
well before he was running for president.
Exactly.
That shows like why lie then? Like people say, well, he wanted to lie because Trump was president. He wasn't president. He wasn't even a credible candidate for president then. So that's why you have to say, like, why would he write that? Now, in the emails, the Republicans have one argument, which is truthful, which is there's nothing from a legal standpoint that indicates any criminal conduct by Donald Trump. That's true. That's true. But there's a lot of smoke there, and it does raise legitimate questions about how much Trump knew about Epstein's criminal activities. Remember, Epstein wrote in one of the emails that Trump spent hours at his house with one of the victims. The Republicans then said, well, it was Virginia Giuffre. It was redacted. Right. Well, we're not sure. We don't know if that was Virginia Giuffre. And if it was Virginia Giuffre,
we don't know.
We don't know.
That's right. I'm so glad you made that point, because this has been on my mind too, is that, first of all, how disgusting is it that we're just going to put the name out there. It's Virginia Giuffre. And let's say it is her name that's been redacted in that email. We're talking about an email conversation that went on 14 years ago. Isn't it quite possible that, Maxwell and Epstein had lots of underage girls who were involved in all of this at that point? They're mixing up the names. You just don't know. It just right. Like, why would Donald Trump be spending hours at his house to begin with?
Well, this is where it gets back to their friendship. And Trump is trying to gaslight us by saying this is all a Democratic hoax when he was good friends with Epstein. And then they did have a falling out. And instead of Trump acknowledging that and saying, radical transparency, just unleash the files, he is twisting arms to an extent that is surprising even to me, to take Lauren Boebert into the Situation Room and said, you can't vote to release the files. Well, look, Trump may not be guilty of anything, but he's sure acting guilty, right? Yeah. It's not the crime, it's a cover-up. It's making us wonder, what's this about? Why are you protesting too much? And then there are other emails that showed that he said, Epstein said he knew Trump, of course, he knew about the girls. Now, what does that mean? That needs to be fleshed out some more. We don't know, but all this stuff, the arm twisting, the emails, now you see when Trump is saying don't release the files, it looks less like a political calculation and more like a cover-up.
Yeah. And the New York Times reported this, as Mr. Trump's presidential campaign gained traction in December 2015, Epstein asked Landon Thomas Jr., then a New York Times reporter, quote, would you like to see photos of Donald and girls in bikinis in my kitchen? It is unclear whether Epstein actually possessed such photos. Thomas, who has not worked at the Times since 2019, said Epstein never provided them. Epstein also told him about a time when he said Trump was so focused, quote, so focused on watching young women in a swimming pool that he bumped into a door, leaving his nose print on the glass. And so, this is, one of the things that the White House has said repeatedly, and Caroline Leavitt, I believe she said it at the briefing on Wednesday, was, oh, well, he kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago because he thought he was a creep. The emails do not indicate that Donald Trump thought Jeffrey Epstein was a creep.
Well, there's the timeline, and that's where it gets confusing.
Yeah.
Because, right, it could be true that at some point there, Trump was told, and the story goes down here in Palm Beach, that there was a member of Mar-a-Lago who complained to Trump that Epstein was creeping on his underage daughter, and then Trump banned Epstein. Epstein says, that's not true. I was never a member of Mar-a-Lago. No, that's not the story. The story is that you were banned. You can go to Mar-a-Lago without being a member, but then he was banned. And then there was a story that, no, it wasn't about that. It was about a property dispute. I don't know the details, but I've heard both stories. And that's where Trump should come out and just say he was a creep. I ended it. And then the key part is release the documents. As long as these documents are kept secret, this story ain't going away. It's only going to get worse. And it's funny, Jim, the email that you read about Trump's nose being on the glass door, that wasn't provided by the Democrats. That was provided by the Republicans.
Right. Exactly.
Why? I don't know. I was thinking about this. there's when you're a lawyer, you can provide documents, you can try to withhold them under certain rules, or you can give them everything. You can love it too much. Like, it's like when you love legislation too much, put 300 more pages of legislation in there and just bury the bill under its own weight. Well, same thing as a lawyer. You can just say, we're going to give you the whole trove and good luck finding needles and haystacks. Well, it didn't take long for the media to find needles and haystacks. And I think another part of it is, I don't think the politicians on the committee, the Republicans, read through the 20, 30,000 pages. So when they submitted these documents, they didn't know what was in it.
Yeah, I think the likely scenarios incompetence explains why they released all of that stuff. But thank you very much for doing that. I appreciate it. And there's a Thanksgiving one too. There's an email that references Thanksgiving. Not that one. I think maybe that's the April 2011 one. Well, anyway, if we pop it up on screen, I can read it to you. But what it shows is I think this was about Trump and Epstein maybe spending Thanksgiving together. We can find that one, we can show. But the familiarity between these two men, and Donald Trump has tried and tried and tried to make it sound as though this is just some guy, some creep he kicked out of his club, and it's just, the lies don't work. And Robert Garcia, the ranking member on the House Oversight Committee, was saying to me and other folks, there's more to come. There's more coming. And Dave, isn't it the case that we're not, what was, even that large tranche of documents that came from the House Oversight Committee, Republicans, like 20,000 documents and email. I was going through them today, and it's nuts. There's all kinds of stuff in there. That's not even the full thing. There apparently is video, there's pictures.
Well, that's why Trump's working so hard to keep it secret. I mean, it must be something else in there that's really bad. And this was such an unforced error that now, we're all waiting with bated breath of step by step, drip by drip of what's coming out. It didn't have to be like this. And now he's put his own members in a tough position. They're going to have to vote to release the files. When that goes to the floor of the House, those members are going to have to go back home and explain to their constituents why they tried to protect Jeffrey Epstein.
Right.
That is not a good vote to take if you want to vote to prevent the public from looking at the Epstein file.
Yeah, and here's that Thanksgiving one. It says here, let's see here. Hope today is fun for you. Fun. When are you back in NYC? All next week. And then this goes back and forth between Jeffrey Epstein and somebody named Faith Cates. I don't know who that is, but it says, okay, Dylan will want to see you. I always want to see you. Where are you having Thanksgiving? Faith asks. EVA, Epstein says. That means Glenn, check on his red hair. I don't know what that means, but this goes on and on and on. He's such a snooze. Who else is down there? And it says David Faisal, Hansen, and then Trump. And so now what it appears to say here, and I can't say it conclusively says that, because I mean, as you, Dave, you're an attorney, you probably would want to read this email to somebody and ask, oh, what does this mean? Does this mean that Trump was having Thanksgiving with Jeffrey Epstein?
And what year was that?
It says November 2017. This is after he is president.
See what to me is that I will give some of these folks a pass if they were hanging out with Epstein before he was a registered sex offender. Yeah. Once he was charged and convicted of crimes and had to register as a level 3 sex offender, the highest designation in New York and Florida, then why are you still friends with this guy? Why are we hanging out with this guy? Right? And that was 2008. So I'm not giving anyone a pass at it. And this was supposed to be a Democratic conspiracy, right? That's why the Marjorie Taylor Greens of the world were like begging to release the files. Well, what we also found from the emails were that Bill Clinton never went to Epstein Island, but yet there are emails, correspondence between Epstein and Steve Bannon. Right. One of the folks who was like, release the files. It's like a Democratic conspiracy. Okay.
Bannon was working for Trump as his chief strategist at the White House for part of 2017. And then even though he got fired by Trump, kind of remained in the Trump orbit and was an informal advisor to him, sort of off and on. They would fight. He would be an advisor, then he wouldn't be an advisor. But he remained in his orbit almost all the way until the end of his first term. And he remains so to this day, is my understanding, informally here and there. why isn't Steve Bannon saying, dude, you're a creep, get out of here. I don't want no more emails from you, man. Stop. They continue to have these conversations, and it makes me, I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on TV, but I would definitely want to sit down with some of these people who are mentioning this, go through these emails and ask, what is this all about?
I love it. Including Michael Wolff, journalist who's giving
Yeah.
Jeffrey Epstein PR advice and trying to give him leverage over Trump like he's his lawyer or something. I'm like, dude, this guy's a pedophile. What are you doing?
Yeah. Well, Michael was trying to write books, and I guess that was that maybe that he would say that was what he was doing. But yeah, I mean, there was that email where they're talking, I think it's December of 2015. This is after Trump has already announced that he's running for president. He's waging a campaign for the presidency for the first time. And, Michael Wolff is coaching Epstein on, what they should say to each other back and forth. Yeah, this is it right here. I hear CNN. This is Michael Wolff. I hear CNN planning to ask Trump tonight about his relationship with you, either on air or in a scrum afterwards. Michael understands how it works in the business. And then Jeffrey Epstein says, if we were able to craft an answer for him, what do you think it should be? And Michael says, I think you should let him hang himself. If he says he hasn't been on the plane or to the house, then that gives you a valuable PR and political currency, and goes on and on and on. But what it suggests, if I'm not mistaken, Dave, is that there was still some kind of relationship between Epstein and Trump in this late 2015 time period.
I mean, that's what
right?
it sounds like, but that's why you need to release the files, because that's what it sounds like, that they had some communication, and then Epstein, and then you see the end where Wolff said, don't worry, I'm sure he'll say Epstein, terrific guy.
That's right. That's what it says at the end of the email. I can read it if we want to blow it up on screen for folks, but it says that that this is all, Trump would write this off as political correctness that would have no place in a Trump regime. I think is, of course it is possible when asked, he'll say, Jeffrey's a great guy and has gotten a raw deal and is a victim of political correctness, which is to be outlawed in a Trump regime. I mean, this is Michael and Jeffrey sounding like, Trump could say something like that in December of 2015. It's just unreal stuff. And remember that there's that famous New York magazine article from 2002 where Trump talks about Jeffrey Epstein and talks about what a great guy he is, but that he likes ladies on the younger side. He likes women on the younger side. And here are the Steve Bannon texts that you were talking about, Dave. Bannon and Epstein going back and forth via text, allegedly, according to the documents that were released.
This is the case of the dog chasing the car. You had Bannon and Trump and MAGA and Dan Bongino and Kash Patel all saying, release the files, release the list. This is the biggest conspiracy, and we're going to get to the bottom of it. QAnon. And now look what's coming out. This is really crazy. And when they say, well, why didn't the Democrats tried to release this? Why do they all of a sudden care now? It's because it's always been a Republican obsession. The Democrats were never obsessed about this because we knew it wasn't a Democratic conspiracy. And Republicans are the ones who made this an issue. This thing probably would never become an issue had it not been one of the key conspiracy points that Trump used throughout his whole campaign. And that's why it's not going away. That's why you can't just blame it on a Democratic hoax, because the Republicans are the ones waiting for the information they were promised.
Right. They're the conspiracy theorists. And then when, they get into office, people are like, okay, well, tell us about the damn conspiracy theory. Let's see some documents. Let's see some evidence of this. And then all of a sudden they clam up. And it wasn't until Elon Musk said, was it earlier this year, over the summer, where he said, the reason why the files have been kept a secret is because Donald Trump is in them. And that was when, they started to put their guards up over at DOJ, FBI, White House. The DOJ put that memo out saying nothing to see here, please disperse. And it's been a nightmare for them ever since.
Exactly.
They're
never going to get beyond this until they release the files. And I don't think they're going to release the files as long as Trump is president. Here's what I predict. I think the House will pass this discharge petition, to release the files. The Senate, I think, will pass it. There are like 13 Republican senators up for re-election. How are they going to go back to their constituents and say that they voted against transparency and Epstein? And then you'll have the most dramatic veto in history, maybe, where Trump's going to have to veto this or accept it. And then if it does get overridden over his veto, or if he doesn't veto it, then it'll go to the DOJ. And there are ways that the Justice Department could reveal less. Yeah, they could, because there are court orders apparently in place to protect some of the alleged co-conspirators. According to reports, there are rules on not disclosing information about victims. And so they could say, you know, anything involving a victim, not only are we going to redact it, we're going to not reveal it. We're going to keep it in secret. And so we'll see what happens. That's why I don't think we're going to get the whole file while Trump is still president. And
you're less optimistic than I am. I think it's quite possible that you'll have you won't have 13 senators who will go along with the Democrats, and that you will see somebody in the Senate try to block this on behalf of Donald Trump. And one has to think, if they were taking Lauren Boebert into the Situation Room to show that off, to get her to, you know, block this discharge petition in the House, that they must be lining up some kind of goodies for the Republican senators who they think they probably are workshopping this with a whiteboard. Which senator is the one that we can get to go along with us and block this? Or who are the guys that we can get to block this? And it is going to be very interesting to watch. I think you're absolutely 100% correct about that.
Right. But they're still up for re-election, and all you need to break the filibuster is just 60 votes total.
60 votes.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see if they get 13. There are 53, and if you can get 13, then that's something, I guess. But
yeah. You know, this thing is just didn't have to be. This was a man-made crisis. It was never inevitable. It was created by Donald Trump, who has been really good at spin, really good at messaging, communication. But on this one, he gets an F.
Yeah. And I do want to play something that I heard Megyn Kelly was talking about this case. And Dave, maybe you can enlighten us a little bit. She was talking about the case and talking about how, you know, she knows somebody who's close to all this. And, you know, Jeffrey Epstein wasn't into young girls. He was into teenagers, which is not anyway. It's a complete mess, whatever she is saying here. But let's play it and talk about it on the other side.
Before, but just as a reminder, I do know somebody very, very close to this case who is in a position to know virtually everything. Not everything, but virtually everything. And this person has told me from the start, years and years ago, that Jeffrey Epstein, in this person's view, was not a pedophile. This is this person's view, who was there for a lot of this, but that he was into the barely legal type. Like, he liked 15-year-old girls. And I realize this is disgusting. I'm definitely not trying to make an excuse for this. I'm just giving you facts. That he wasn't into like 8-year-olds, but he liked the very young teen types that could pass for even younger than they were, but would look legal to a passerby. And that is what I believed, and that was what I reliably was told for many years. And it wasn't until we heard from Pam Bondi that they had tens of thousands of videos of alleged, forgive me, they used to call it kiddie porn. Now they call it child sexual abuse material.
Maybe we don't
on his computer.
I mean, Dave, I don't know what Megyn Kelly is trying to do here, if she's trying to split hairs and all of this. But a 15-year-old, I mean, that is child sex abuse. That is not. I don't know what she's talking about here. Can you weigh in on the legality of this here? I mean, it seems to me that Megyn Kelly does not know what she's talking about. And maybe she's just relaying a story, but it doesn't sound good what she's saying.
It was inartful, but I do think she was relaying the story. She was saying what this guy was saying. And at the end, it sort of conflates her beliefs with his. And I think that's where she may need to clarify it, because I saw there's a firestorm online because of
Firestorm.
Yeah, because I mean, I can't imagine anyone would say it's justified against a teenage girl under 18.
Exactly.
Nothing. First of all, sex trafficking is always illegal, but if you are 18 or over, it requires force, fraud, or coercion. If you're under 18, there is no need for force, fraud, or coercion. The individual cannot consent. That person is a victim. You know what's a little tidbit on this also? A reason why, and this is something I know as being a former state attorney down here. in Palm Beach County, is one of the reasons why the prosecutors here in Palm Beach County at the time did not go hard against Epstein, is because the law at the time was that if you were an underage girl, a 15, 14-year-old, and you were getting paid money for sex acts, you were under the law seen as a prostitute. And that's why Epstein was charged with solicitation of prostitution. Thankfully, now we've come to our senses and the laws have changed and they are victims. They're a 15-year-old girl is not a prostitute anymore. She's a victim. But because the laws were different, it was a different time. Now, this is not to excuse the prosecutors then. This is not to justify it. This is just to give you a little bit of an explanation of what was going through their minds at the time.
And you were mentioning Palm Beach. I mean, folks need to understand you were a prosecutor in Palm Beach. I mean, I have to think that this is what everybody is talking about down there right now, or a lot of people are talking about this right now, that this is now blown up, this Trump-Epstein relationship, which is now not just pictures of guys dancing on the dance floor and acting lewd and that sort of thing. It's now documented. And I just have to think people are saying, see, I told you, or I knew this was going on, or this, that, and the other thing.
Oh, I mean, everyone's talking about it down here, but they're probably talking about it everywhere. And also, I was the state attorney, but 6 years after the Epstein case came through the office, it was already closed.
Make sure we say that. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I put that in my bio. State attorney starting in 2013. And then I left the office in January so I can speak out more on shows like yours. But it is something that what happened was it was through the office in Palm Beach County, the state prosecutors and the local police chief in Palm Beach, who really wanted Jeffrey Epstein to go down for all this. He didn't like the way that the local prosecutors were handling it. So he went to the feds, called the FBI, went to the feds, and the feds took it away. And then they entered into their own deal with Epstein, the deal that is so controversial with a non-prosecutorial agreement that involved Epstein pleading guilty not to federal crimes, but to state crimes and serving time in a state facility or here, a local jail. I've never seen the feds take away a case and then say, now we're going to make you plead guilty to state crimes, not federal crimes, and your sentence is going to be in local jail.
So weird. So strange. And it's been this way for years. If you talk to the survivors, they've said that this is, they've been pleading for justice, pleading for the truth to come out, pleading for, somebody to come along and show some guts and do this the right way. And so many lives have been damaged in the process. We saw that what happened with Virginia Giuffre earlier this year, committing suicide. I mean, it's just been a sad, terrible, tragic story. But Dave, always appreciate the insights, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim. And thank you for showing people my Substack at Dave
You got it.
I love being on your show. I always get new subscribers. So thank you. You got a great audience.
Good. Well, check out Dave, because Dave tells it like it is and boils it down in a really relatable way, which is why we like it. And you're a dog owner too. So, you can't be too bad. Exactly.
Thanks, my friend. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Dave.